Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the ALM Online Expert Week. Today's presentation is Automation versus Manual, how to select what to automate. I'd like to introduce to you Lena Katz, QA Manager in the ALM R&D group. She will be taking you through a series of slides. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please use the question area on the right panel of your screen to type them in, and we will be reading those and answering those either throughout the presentation or at the end. Also, after the presentation and throughout the week, please feel free to join the conversation on the IT Experts community on the QC ALM forums. Today's forum, Expert Week, today is on the public forums, and the next days will be held in the private forums. And at the end of the presentation, you will see a link where you can join. So with that, I will hand it to Lena.
So hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining the Expert Week and specifically this session. So as Raquel introduced me, I'm Lena Katz. I'm a QA manager in ALM R&D group. I work for the UI group developing the next generation of ALM. And we can start the session now. Also, as Raquel mentioned, you have the option to ask questions. So we have three major parts of this presentation. I'll stop after each part, and we'll see if you have any relevant, any questions that we can discuss. Okay, so how do we choose what tests to automate? So I guess that if you've joined this session, so you're doing both manual and automation tests. And I guess that I don't need to explain the benefits of automation. We invest a lot in automation. We find it very effective. But we also know that the automation is a very expensive effort. I'm also familiar with the many projects that were terminated because of wrong investment in the automation. And I'd like to present some of the practices that we do internally in ALM for choosing the automation, the test for automation. This is very much dependent on your project. We'll be discussing that. So though I'm presenting it for how we work, so I believe that this presentation could be also relevant for many types of automation framework or development practices, or like agile and waterfall and mixed methodologies. But still, I'll be giving you examples on how we work in ALM. So we talked that the automation is very, very important, but it's also very expensive. So we need to have qualified people for the automation. We need to invest sometimes in infrastructure for specific needs of the automation for your group. We've been developing further automation capabilities. We've been investing in that a lot. Also, you have the development time itself for the automation, but the biggest part and the crucial part is the maintenance. So I think that's a big factor in every automation project. Even though that the automation is being developed, you need to maintain it on a daily basis. Because otherwise, if it's not maintained and people don't notice the results, the efficiency of the automation will be lower, and you'll be wasting your time, basically. Okay, so when we were thinking about how do we automate tests, so we thought, do we automate all tests? And as we know, the automation effort is high, so definitely no. We won't be doing automation for all test levels. We have also different considerations for that. Some of automation cases are not cost effective. So first of all, we have technology constraints. It's usually related to the infrastructure of the automation that you will be using. I'll give you an example. If your automation framework cannot easily use movement between browsers or windows, and you will be investing in that 5 days versus 5 minutes to do a manual test for that. Usually, if it's not an important case for you, it means that you might not want to automate it and still do it manually. The other factor would be the frequency of the test execution. If you have tests that are not frequently executed, might be related also to the test level coverage, to specific environments. So it might mean that you will also want to keep the manual testing there and not invest in the automation. Additional aspect is when we start the automation. So I know that some companies and projects break from time to time that they do automation from day one, but it might be also wrong for your project, and you'll need to check that. So if you have a difference between a stable project versus a frequently changed project. So as I mentioned, we are working in a UI group for the new LM generation project, and this project is frequently changing. We work in Agile, so it means that the HTML and the DOM and the functionality is frequently changed. And in this case, it's not worth starting the automation from day one. We'll be discussing it in next slide, how we do that and how we manage this process. But this is definitely a good example why not to start the automation from day one. It could be also relevant for the development methodology. Agile usually means that you will have frequent changes. Waterfall usually means that you'll have more stability. As for the production environments and how you deploy your newly developed patches or features, so it's also could reflect on the automation start date. So in case you have frequent releases and you have lots of regression cycles, it could be relevant for deliveries of SaaS that, for an example, big companies have, web companies actually, have very frequent deliveries, maybe on a daily basis, sometimes even several deliveries per day, so they need to have a strong regression coverage. And if you need to have a frequent regression cycle, so it means that you want to start your automation as soon as possible, but also depends on the stability of your project. And also could be very much relevant to what your group develops. So in case you develop features that cannot be tested manually and you need automation for that, so it also makes sense specifically there to wait for stability, but to start the automation as soon as possible. Okay, so after all that we've mentioned, so we still invest a lot in automation now in our group, and we actually deliver all the features. with automation. So how do we do that? So we have, I want to discuss here 3 aspects. First of all, how do we adjust our manual tests to automation practices? When do we start automating, and how we mentioned stability and how is it reflected, and also talk about maintenance, which is a very important factor. So let's start with the test authoring and how it's adjusted to the automation. Okay, so first of all, before we start, we have several roles in our group. We have the dev tester, who has both the capability of manual testing and the automation testing. So, a dev tester is testing a content that is being delivered for a specific development team. So he does the manual test authoring, the manual execution, and then the automation. We have a cross-function role called QA architect, who is doing the architecture of the testing scope, the cross features, methodologies, and more. But what's relevant for the automation is that the QA architect defines which tests will be needed to be covered by automation. And we, of course, have the developer that, besides developing the content, he should also do the design review for the automation, design for the test code review, and here in our group many times, also the developers write the automation just for workload balancing. Okay, so how do we do the test authoring? We have like an evolution of test authoring, and it's very much specific to how you work, but this is a methodology that we found that could be, that works well for us. So first of all, before the change, we had log end-to-end test cases, and we found out that we need to break down the test cases into a small, non-dependent tests for the automation purposes. And the reason for that, let's think that if you have a test with 30 steps and it breaks in the middle and it has dependency, so the rest of the test cases won't run. And if you break it down into more generic tests that are less dependent, so you'll have much more parallel capabilities, both, by the way, for manual testing and for automation testing, because then you will be able to parallel the efforts. We also found a nice way to have the description and the expected results of the test more compatible to automation. So we have a standard that we use. It's called GWT, given when then. So this is a pattern that according to that we compose our tests. The given for the automation, this is a precondition. Then you have the action itself. The expected result would be the validation that needs to be done in the automation, and variants could be parameters for the automation. So this is a very clear methodology of how to move between the manual and automation, and we also find it that it's working well for manual testing, because then everybody can run those tests. Okay. So except for the test authoring, the major aspect is to define the test levels. So when we have deliveries, so as I mentioned, we work in Agile, so we have user stories deliveries for each sprint. And for each user story, we defined 2 levels of testing. That would be sanity and full. Sanity is the main functionality, the very main functionality of the user story delivered. It correlates to acceptance test, and full would be the non-sanity test. Those tests are being authored, executed, and verified by the dev testers. Then later on, and we have an example here. So we have a user story for the feature of dashboard. And in the sanity folder, I'll be able to find my relevant tests. After all the user stories are implemented, then it's time for the QA architect to define the test levels. And for the feature test levels, we have sanity, end-to-end, and full. When we said that sanity, this is the basic functionality delivered, like the acceptance test. The end-to-end is the main flows functionality, the main positive, main negative cases, and more. And the sanity case, the sanity test would be producing critical defects. The end-to-end level cases will be producing critical and high defects, and the sanity is included in the end-to-end tests. Now, we choose to automate the sanity and the end-to-end tests. We find that the coverage is good enough for the change in functionality that we need to be verifying on a daily basis. So that's why the automation on sanity and end-to-end is being executed on a daily basis. And the full coverage is done by demand. For an example, if I'm now refactoring the whole user story or the whole feature, so I need to complete the full tests and then add the additional manual effort. But we see that it's not done frequently, and still because of the automation efforts and the maintenance efforts, we actually prefer to keep the full level testing done manually, and the sanity and the end-to-end to be done automatically. So we actually have 90% of the sanity and end-to-end cases automated, and we can't, sometimes 100% cannot be reached due to framework limitations. So we deliver all the features with the automation, but still in the sanity and end-to-end cases, sometimes they need to be done manually if we can't automate or if it's not cost effective to automate them. Okay, so now that we talked how we break the test into specific levels, we also want to have tracking and classification of the automation tests. So here's an example of some step, and we have 2 fields for the monitoring. So we have the automation status. So we'll be able to track when it's already automated, in progress, and most important, when it cannot be automated. So we'll know in the regression cycle what steps needs to still be done manually. And also, as you all know, we have many automation types. We mainly, for our project, as it's UI development, we use UI end-to-end tests. But we also have different projects working with different automation tools, and we need the tracking for that as well. Okay. So this is actually the end of the first section. So in case if anyone has any questions, so that would be a good time to ask now. Raquel, do we have any questions? Or can we continue?
So far, no questions. So just a reminder, you can just type your questions in the right panel.
Okay, good. Okay, moving on. Okay, so if until now we talked about the test authoring methodology, so now we will be talking about the application stability and when do we start to automate. First of all, we deliver features. Feature is a combine of user stories. So first of all, we have user stories, design and development within the relevant development teams. Later on, we have the user stories manual testing. We find defects, we fix the defects. And when all the user stories in the feature are delivered and stable, this is when we say that the feature is stabilized and it could be ready for automation. Okay. So when the feature is ready for automation, then we start the automation design process and development. Also, a very important phase is to stabilize the automation. We test it locally on our environments to make sure that all the automation test cases pass and green. And that it works on all the relevant browsers that we would like to have coverage on, and environments, and so on. And once the automation is stabilized, we add it to our production Jenkins jobs, and we run it on a very frequent basis. We'll be discussing that in the next slides. And this is actually the stage where we call the feature done, because we've implemented the content of the feature, tested it, fixed all the defects, and the automation is running and giving us continuous feedbacks. Okay, so until now we covered the manual test authoring and how it's adjusted to the automation, the application and the automation processes and stability. If you have any questions, so
we do have one question, Lena, that you should be able to see it. I just assigned it to you.
Oh, it's a very, very tiny box. Okay, now I see it now. Okay. Okay, so the question here is, besides the common sense approach to which test to automate, are there any industry standards on which tests are good candidates? Okay, so basically I think that this is a combination. After all, the test architect will need to choose by himself which tests need to be automated according to his experience, according to his system understanding, and as he's an architect and he reviews all the features and understands the whole end-to-end flows, so it depends on him. But still, for an example, the standards that we have is that we deliver features in every push. It's done, we're actually now practicing it for the next versions. So we have push deliveries every month, and it means that we need to rerun the whole regression cycle each month and also include the new features. So these efforts cannot be done manually, and that's why we invest a lot of in automation. So I guess that in industry standards, it's very much dependent on how you deliver your application and what are the standards that you need to, quality standards that you need to have. So in addition to the automation of Sanity and end-to-end cases, so we, every push we also discuss if additional coverage is needed, for an example, for the full package of tests, and this is how we determine. And many times we also see that there are some tests that needs to be descoped or added, and we change it as we go. Okay, so I hope that it answers the question. Okay, so now let's move on to the automation, execution, and maintenance. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we divided the test coverage levels, and we automate the Sanity and the end-to-end suites. And now we would like to define where and in what environments and what's the frequency of every execution. So first of all, on every check-in of the developer, we have a smoke test. This is an end-to-end test covering the main application flows actually. It's called pre-flight. And on every check-in to make sure that our main trunk is stable and we don't have major breaks, this is the test that we run. Then we have two kinds of environments. We have the continuous delivery, we call it CD environment, and nightly environment. So the CD environment is a full installation. It's being updated every 3 hours. It contains the latest check-ins. And there we'd like to see that no major functionality is broken. That's why we run the Sanity suite. And we run it on Chrome only because we see that most of the frequent breaks are not relevant to specific browsers or environments. And this is according also to investigation that we've done over years. And this is how we see that it's relevant for the coverage of our application. In your application, it might be different. The nightly environment is actually installed every night. It takes the latest continuous delivery successful build and deploys it every night, 10 p.m. This is our main testing environment. And there we run the end-to-end test level automation suite. Here we already cover more browsers, Chrome, IE, Firefox, and we actually have additional tests there. For an example, we have specific automation for CSS or styling tests. This is based on the image comparison tools, such as Image Magic or Amplitools, if you know. This could be a whole session that we can be talking about that. But to track the style changes and UI layout defects, this is how it's done also in IT environment. And in addition to the end-to-end Sanity, CSS, and smoke test, we have also different tests, such as a performance test automation that is running, integration test. This is like a cross products test automation that could be running, and so on. Okay. So as we mentioned, maintenance is crucial. It will affect your automation project costs, and will definitely determine how you will need to choose your tests. So just several best practices for maintenance. First of all, to check what kind of suites the developers can run locally in order to keep the automation stabilized. For an example, if I'm working on a specific feature, meaning in a specific code area, for an example, the dashboard that we previously mentioned, if the developer will know that he has a specific test called dashboard, and he will run it with, locally on his environment, or it could be done on CI or whatever methodologies that you choose. So you have less probability of breaks. If you are going to be investing much in automation, so you'll know that the crucial part is to have a continuous investigation of automation failures. For an example, in terms of automation investments, so the automation development is about 15 or 25 to 25% of the whole development effort of the feature. Let's say if the dashboard feature is 100 man days, so it could be 20 man days just for the development of the automation. So you'll be investing, and it's very much related to the specific framework that you're using. If it's a whole new code that you're testing, and then you'll need to add many new actions and so on. But generally, it takes a lot. So if you do invest a lot in the automation, it also means that you need to maintain it well in order to have it productive, and means that it produces real defects, and you're working internally according to your methodologies on how to run the automation and so on. So for an example here, we do test automation maintenance every day. When the automation suites are triggered and failed, the dev testers firstly monitor the failures. It could be real defects. It could be infrastructural changes in the automation application, in the runner, in the CI/CD, and so on. But it also could be test maintenance due to functional changes. So unless you do continuous investigation and you keep the automation green, it will be harder for you to show the real efficiency of your framework. Also here internally, if the defects are fixed between build to build, we don't necessarily report official defects. So our factor of efficiency is to see how long the tests maintain green, and not the amount of defects that it produces. And the most important thing is the automation is very much relevant to the methodology that you work on, to the technology, to the way that you develop, to your groups, and to people. It's very important to learn where you fail and to constantly improve it. That's all for the presentation.
There are
Let's see.
a few questions there for you, Lena. Can you see them?
Barely. There is some problem that I can't actually resize the panel.
I can read it. Like
that would be great. Yeah.
The question is, what is the effort involved for your automation scripts maintenance? How much % of the automation development effort?
Okay. So the development itself, I mentioned it a few minutes ago. So it's about 15 to 25% of the development of the whole feature. Means like it's being managed by the development teams, and if my feature development is 100 days, so my automation could be between 15 to 25 days, generally. This is just the development and the first stabilization, and then the maintenance. Then the continuous maintenance, while we execute it, it's very much dependent on your methodology of how to maintain your test, which tests to execute, and what you do in order to prevent breaks in the application or the automation. We do test maintenance every day. So sometimes when our main trunk is not stable, it could definitely take a lot of time in the iteration. When we see that the main trunk is being more stabilized, so it could take place, but it's changing. But I can definitely say that it costs a lot.
And then, thank you, Lena. We have one more question. How do you differentiate a smoke test versus sanity test?
Okay, so the sanity test level that we define, this is for in feature level. And when we deliver, we have many features. And then we break it down in every feature for sanity and end-to-end. And the smoke test is actually a combination of the whole flows in every feature. So let's say that I'm now a developer. I'd like to check in my code. I'd like to see that I'm not going to break any major functionality. So we have here pre-flight system that on every check-in runs the smoke test. But if I really want to be a really good developer, then I'll also run the relevant automation suites or all the suites. It very much depends on the amount of tests that you have. So there are also automation mechanisms to run tests in parallel, to have less execution time, but the bare minimum for the for developer is to run the smoke test to see that there are no major breaks in the whole application in order to have the main trunk stable.
Thank you, Lena. We have a couple more questions. Someone asked if the recording of the session would be available later. Yes, it will. We will post it on the Quality Center ALM forum on the IT Experts community, and we will provide a link. Actually, Lena, if you could just go to the next slide and show that link.
Yeah.
So if you log on here and then select products and then select Quality Center ALM, there's a post there for the Online Expert Week. It already contains the recordings of the two sessions we had earlier today, and we will have the one for this session there in a couple of hours. And Lena, you have one other question. May I read it to you?
Yeah, please.
recommendations on managing requirements when requirement is linked to the manual test, then manual test is converted to an automated test. And then the follow-up question is, are requirements linked to manual test or automated test, or both manual and automated?
So actually, it depends on your testing tool. If you have a testing tool plugin and your test can be actually tracked through ALM, so yes, it's better to have both the linkage of manual test and automation test, specifically for the results. Here we also in addition to the requirements coverage, we also have additional methodology. We have specific Jenkins test suites that we run. Each development team that has specific responsibilities for features has a job. So here we have, for an example, in our group, we have 4 development teams. Each development team is responsible for specific features, and those features, automation tests, are being executed in those jobs, and their job is to keep the automation job green and the results.
Thank you, Lena. One other question. Who are key players in making judgment to have functionality automated?
So that would be the QA architect. This is a very experienced QA that has the overall vision of the product, working on all the features. We have several QA architects working on the whole features of the product, in opposite to the dev tester that is responsible for the manual and the automation test for specific content for a specific team. So as the QA architect is an experienced QA, following the methodologies, know which tests are important, familiar with the customers and the customer flows, he will know better which test to prioritize to which testing level. And after all of that, we still have the dev testers and sometimes the developers also automating it, and they also have the feedbacks for the architect choice, but basically that's the architect choice.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we have. So
okay.
I think this concludes our presentation. I'd like to just remind you that you can join the online conversation on the IT Experts community on the link that you see here, and we will post the recording later this evening. We look forward to speaking with you this week and in the future. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.